I brought only a small brown paper-wrapped box to the family party, and right in front of everyone. My parents snatched it from my hands while my sister laughed loudly. She's so broke. They had no idea the box contained a key and evidence powerful enough to rip the gold chains from their necks tonight. As the party music crescendoed, I pressed a button on my phone and every eye in the room turned toward us. My name is Lena Hart, and I arrived at the River Hall venue 40 minutes after the Hart family and friends celebration had begun. The champagne flutes were already singing their crystalline songs against each other, and the LED uplighting painted everyone in shades of amber and rose my mother's signature colors for Harbor and Linden events. The scent of white orchids and bergamot hung thick in the air, mixing with traces of Tom Ford and Chanel from the crowd of Columbus's self-proclaimed elite. I clutched my small package wrapped in plain brown craft paper, a deliberate contrast to the silver-ribboned gifts piled on the designated table near the entrance. Lena, finally. My mother Elaine's voice cut through the jazz quartet's rendition of Fly Me to the Moon. She glided toward me in her sequined Tadashi shoji gown, every inch the queen of event planning she believed herself to be. Behind her, the event photographer, one of those trendy ones who shot everything on both digital and film, raised his camera. "You're late," she hissed under her breath while maintaining her photo-ready smile. And what is? Her perfectly manicured fingers reached for the box in my hands. This, before I could respond, she snatched it from my grip with practiced elegance, holding it up as if it were something contaminating. The photographer's flash went off, capturing the moment in stark white light. "Oh my God!" My sister Savannah's laugh rang out from across the room. She abandoned her circle of influencer friends and strutted over in her Revolve dress and Louboutin heels. "She's so broke. Look at that wrapping. Did you get that paper from Trader Joe's?" The laughter rippled through the crowd, that particular brand of polite, champagne-dulled amusement that wealthy people reserve for moments of subtle cruelty. I saw Mrs. Patterson from the country club whisper something to her husband. Derek from the marketing firm tried to hide his smirk behind his whiskey tumbler. Even the servers paused their rotation of canapes to witness my humiliation. My father, Gregory, emerged from his conversation with potential investors, his silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. "Lena, really, after everything we've done for this family's reputation." The weight of their stares pressed against my skin. The jazz quartet had stopped playing, leaving only the hollow sound of ice clinking in glasses and the distant hum of the venue's air conditioning. This was exactly what I'd expected this public theater of disappointment they'd perfected over the years. I straightened my shoulders in my simple black dress from Target, the one I'd chosen specifically for tonight. "Open it," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the thundering in my chest. Elaine's face tightened. "We'll open gifts later, during the open it now." I met her gaze directly, something I rarely did anymore. "In front of everyone. Since you've already made such a production of it." Savannah snorted. "What is it? A homemade coupon book, a coffee shop gift card?" The photographer kept shooting, his camera clicking like an insect. The crowd pressed closer, hungry for drama at what had been, until now, another predictable Hart family showcase. My mother's fingers worked at the brown paper with exaggerated delicacy, as if she were defusing a bomb. The paper fell away, revealing a simple wooden box. Inside, cushioned in black velvet, lay an old family photograph in a plain frame, and beneath it, a single brass key attached to a small memory card. "What is this supposed to be?" Elaine's voice carried that dangerous edge I remembered from childhood, the one that preceded her most vicious critiques. I kept my expression neutral, though my hand found my phone in my pocket. "Just a little something I thought you should have. The key especially. You might want to check what it opens." The room held its breath. In a few moments, when I pressed that button on my phone, the massive LED screen behind the main stage, the one currently displaying a slideshow of Harbor and Linden's greatest moments, would tell a very different story. But for now, I simply stood there, letting them laugh, letting them think they'd won this round. The champagne bubbles rose in glasses all around us, tiny spheres of air fighting their way to the surface, ready to burst. Growing up in the Hart household meant living inside a perpetual wedding magazine. Every dinner table conversation revolved around color palettes, flower arrangements, and which Columbus Country Club member's daughter was getting married next. My parents built Harbor and Linden events from a small party planning service into what they called Ohio's premier luxury event empire, transforming weddings into Hollywood productions, complete with custom lighting rigs and choreographed first dances. I chose a different path. While Savannah gravitated toward the spotlight, becoming their brand ambassador and eventually a lifestyle influencer with her carefully curated Instagram feed, I found myself drawn to numbers that didn't lie. At Northbridge Credit Union, I became a compliance and internal investigation specialist dealing with real transactions, real audits, real consequences. You could be making 3 times that salary if you'd just let me introduce you to the Weatherby family, my mother had said at last year's Thanksgiving. They need someone to manage their venue in Upper Arlington. But no, you prefer your little bank job, checking other people's money like some kind of financial janitor. The truth was, I loved the precision of my work. When money moved through accounts, it left traces digital breadcrumbs that told stories people thought they'd hidden. I'd uncovered restaurant owners laundering cash through inflated catering invoices, exposed a nonprofit director who created ghost employees to funnel donations into his personal account, and identified a wedding venue in Cleveland that was billing insurance companies for events that never happened. 3 months ago, I noticed something familiar in a routine audit. A series of charitable donations from Hearts and Harbors Foundation. Harbor and Linden's supposed philanthropic arm matched exactly with expense reports I'd seen cross-referenced in another investigation. The amounts were too precise, the timing too convenient. I started pulling threads during my lunch breaks. Public records showed Hearts and Harbors had claimed massive tax deductions for underprivileged youth wedding experiences and venue accessibility improvements. But when I cross-checked with state filing records and employment databases, the numbers didn't add up. Employees listed as full-time were actually working training periods without pay. Tips that should have gone to servers were being pooled and redirected. Then I found Savannah's connection. Her influencer management company, Lux Life Media, was receiving monthly consulting fees from Hearts and Harbors. The money would hit her account, sit for exactly 3 days, then move to offshore accounts in the Caymans before circling back as international partnership investments to cover Harbor and Linden's mounting debt from their aggressive expansion. The investigation skills I'd honed at Northbridge revealed a maze of financial deception. They were using charity as a shield, my sister's social media presence as a laundering mechanism, and their employees' trust as collateral. The wedding industry's obsession with perfection had given them the perfect cover who would suspect Ohio's most elegant event planners of running what amounted to a white-collar crime operation. I documented everything meticulously, the way I'd been trained. Screenshots, transaction records, employment contracts with suspicious clauses, emails from their internal server that a whistleblower had forwarded to our anonymous hotline. Each piece of evidence was obtained legally, through public records, voluntary disclosures, and sources protected under federal whistleblower statutes. The key in that box. It opened a safety deposit box at Northbridge, registered under Savannah's name with power of attorney. She probably didn't even remember signing it during one of her champagne-hazed business meetings. Inside that box lay the physical receipts, the second set of books they thought they'd destroyed, and signed confessions from 2 former employees who'd been threatened into silence but came to me when they heard about my work. My family had built their empire on the promise of perfect celebrations, magical moments where everything looked flawless. They'd trained me to spot imperfections, to notice when something was out of place. They just never imagined I'd use that training to expose the rot beneath their own gilded surface. Tonight's party, their 25th anniversary celebration, would be their last performance. I'd made sure of that when I placed those calls to the State Tax Commission, the Department of Labor, and the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office. The investigators were probably already in position, waiting for my signal. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd spent decades turning other people's celebrations into spectacles. Now I was about to give them a finale nobody would forget. The wooden box sat between us like an unexploded ordnance. My mother held the brass key up to the light, examining it as if it might reveal its secrets through sheer force of her scrutiny. The old family photograph taken during happier times at our Lake Erie cottage seemed to mock the current scene with its frozen smiles. A key to what, Gregory demanded, his investor friends forgotten as they watched our family drama unfold better than any reality show. I let the silence stretch, savoring the confusion in their eyes. The key was deliberate theater, a physical prop in tonight's performance. They'd taught me the importance of symbolism in their events, how a single rose could represent eternal love, how the right lighting could transform a warehouse into a palace. Now I was using their own lessons against them. "Check the engraving," I said softly. Savannah snatched the key from our mother's hand, squinting at the tiny letters etched into the brass NB 1437, Northbridge. Her voice climbed an octave. "You got us a safety deposit box. What are you, 80? But Elaine had gone pale beneath her foundation. She knew those initials, recognized the format. Harbor and Linden kept their overflow documents in Northbridge's commercial vault. Box 1437 was in the same row as theirs. The memory card attached to the keychain swayed slightly, catching the light. Such a small thing, barely larger than a fingernail, but it contained 3 gigabytes of meticulously organized evidence. Bank statements showing the circular flow of money, email threads discussing how to categorize personal expenses as charitable donations, screenshots of Savannah's Venmo transactions with descriptions like PR services that corresponded exactly with her Botox appointments and shopping sprees. "What did you do?" Elaine's whisper cut through the party chatter that had resumed around us. "I gave you a gift," I replied. "The key to understanding how much your reputation is really worth. And the memory card, consider it a preview, a trailer, since you love those so much for your events." My father grabbed my wrist, his grip tight enough to hurt. "Whatever game you're playing." "It's not a game." I pulled free, addressing them, but loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "It's evidence. All those years you told me I was wasting my talent at a credit union. Turns out, learning to investigate financial crimes is quite useful when your own family is committing them." Savannah laughed, but it sounded forced. "You're insane. We run a legitimate business." "With 2 sets of books," I interrupted. "With employees working unpaid training periods for months, with charity funds that somehow end up financing your lifestyle content." The photographer had stopped shooting, his camera lowered as he listened. Other guests were openly staring now, their champagne glasses forgotten. "The safety deposit box has the originals," I continued, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "Physical documents you thought were shredded. Signed affidavits from Marcus Thompson and Jennifer Liu, remember them. The servers you fired when they questioned why their tips were being pooled into accounts they couldn't access. Marcus and Jennifer had come to me 3 weeks ago, desperate and angry. They'd kept copies of everything, paranoid and smart. Their evidence had been the final pieces I needed to complete the puzzle. But the real beauty is in the cross-referencing," I said, warming to my theme. "Every charitable donation Hearts and Harbors claimed matches exactly with personal expenses. That team-building retreat in Cabo listed as a youth mentorship program. Savannah's monthly consulting fees. They trace directly to offshore accounts and back again, like a money-laundering merry-go-round. The memory card also contained something else, a recording from Savannah's own Instagram Live where she'd bragged, after too much wine, about how smart companies know how to work the system. She'd deleted it within minutes, but the internet never forgets, and neither did I. "You recorded us," Savannah's voice broke. "Your own family." "No," I said. "You recorded yourselves. Every email, every transaction, every falsified document. I just collected what was already there. What you were careless enough to leave in your wake because you thought no one would ever look, because you thought being the Hart family meant being untouchable." The brass key caught the light again as Elaine clutched it, her knuckles white. Such a small thing to bring down an empire. But then again, the biggest doors often had the smallest keys. The box is accessible 24/7, I added, in case the authorities need to review the contents tonight. The word authorities rippled through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. The party atmosphere curdled, champagne suddenly tasting sour, canapes sitting heavy in stomachs. This was just the appetizer. The main course would come when they realized who else was attending tonight's celebration. The decision to destroy them hadn't come easily, even after discovering the extent of their fraud. Part of me had hoped for another way, a quiet settlement, a private reckoning. But then I remembered Marcus Thompson's face when he told me about losing his apartment because 3 months of training meant 3 months without pay. I thought about Jennifer Lou's daughter, who'd had to drop out of Ohio State because the tips that should have supplemented their income were being siphoned into Savannah's marketing fund. I met with Brooke Ellery, a labor and tax attorney, in her downtown Columbus office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks ago. She reviewed my evidence for 3 hours, occasionally whistling low at particularly damning documents. "This is extensive," she'd said, adjusting her reading glasses. "But you know if we proceed, there's no going back. Criminal fraud, wage theft, tax evasion. These aren't slap-on-the-wrist violations." "I know," I'd replied, thinking of all the employees over the years who'd been too afraid to speak up, too desperate for work to challenge the Harbor and Linden machine. Brooke had laid out the strategy with surgical precision. We don't engage in direct confrontation. Instead, we activate the legal mechanisms already in place. The State Tax Commission has a task force specifically for charitable fraud. The Department of Labor's been cracking down on wage theft in the service industry, and the Franklin County prosecutor, she's up for re-election and would love a high-profile white-collar case. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than a messy family confrontation that could be dismissed as personal vendetta, we'd let the system they'd cheated do the work. Each agency would receive a carefully prepared packet of evidence, cross-referenced and annotated. The timing would be crucial, synchronized to prevent any opportunity for damage control or document destruction. I spent the next 2 weeks gathering the final pieces. Marcus introduced me to 3 other former employees who'd kept records of their unpaid hours. Jennifer had photographs of the tip-pooling ledger that showed clear discrepancies between what was collected and what was distributed. A bartender named David Reeves had even recorded a conversation where Gregory explicitly told him that refusing to participate in the tip pool would result in termination. The ghost employees were harder to prove until I found the pattern. Each one had a social security number that traced back to deceased individuals, people who died in other states years ago. Harbor and Linden had been claiming wages paid to dead people, then writing off those wages as business expenses while pocketing the money. But it was the charity fraud that would be their undoing. Hearts and Harbors Foundation had claimed over $2 million in tax-deductible donations over 5 years. They'd submitted photos of youth wedding experiences that were actually just regular events with some teenagers photoshopped into the background. The venue improvements they'd claimed were for accessibility. The receipts showed purchases of new sound systems and lighting rigs for their for-profit events. I coordinated with Brooke to file formal complaints with each agency, timing them to arrive simultaneously. The State Tax Commission received theirs at 9 a.m. on a Monday. The Department of Labor got theirs an hour later. The prosecutor's office was hand-delivered at noon. Then came the masterstroke tonight's anniversary party. Brooke had connections. 2 labor investigators, Michael Harrison and Sandra Wu, would attend as +1s to legitimate invitations. A tax commission auditor named James Fitzgerald would be there as a potential client. They'd have their warrants pre-signed, ready to execute the moment they witnessed any violation directly. "You understand?" Brooke had warned. "Once those warrants are executed at a public event, the media will pick it up immediately. Your family's reputation won't just be damaged, it'll be destroyed." I'd thought about all the couples whose weddings had been ruined by Harbor and Linden's corner cutting, all the vendors who'd been strong-armed into accepting late payments while my parents flaunted their wealth. I thought about how they'd laughed at my little bank job while building their empire on theft and lies. Good, I'd said. The countdown was set. Tonight, at exactly 10:45 p.m., when Savannah began her live-streamed charity fundraiser segment, the QR code on the backdrop would be replaced with one I'd created linking directly to a public folder containing the evidence summary. The investigators would move in during the chaos. The warrant executions would be captured on the same cameras meant to celebrate Harbor and Lyndon's success. I looked at my phone. 9:15 p.m. In 90 minutes, the Hart family empire would collapse in front of Columbus's elite, live-streamed to thousands of Savannah's followers, recorded by professional photographers they'd hired themselves. There was something poetic about that, using their own need for spectacle as the weapon to destroy them. The River Hall's main ballroom had been transformed into what my mother called an immersive experience of luxury. Crystal chandeliers threw prismatic light across the crowd. The DJ's setup looked like a spaceship command center, and the LED stage panels cycled through images of Harbor and Lyndon's greatest moments, celebrity weddings, governors' galas, charity showcases that were now evidence of fraud. I watched Michael Harrison, the labor investigator, chatting near the bar with apparent casualness. He wore a navy suit that helped him blend with the corporate crowd, his investigator's shield hidden in his jacket pocket. Sandra Wu stood by the dessert station, her phone discreetly recording the interaction between my father and the catering staff, specifically how he was instructing them about the voluntary overtime they'd be working tonight. James Fitzgerald from the Tax Commission had positioned himself near the registration table where Hearts and Harbor's donation forms were being distributed. He'd already photographed 3 forms that promised tax deductions for contributions that would never reach any charity. The DJ, a local celebrity who went by DJ Platinum, was building toward the evening's climax. The bass thumped through the floor, vibrating in my chest like a second heartbeat. In 20 minutes, Savannah would take the stage for her live stream segment, expecting to collect donations and brand endorsements in real time. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC's voice boomed across the room, "please direct your attention to the stage as we prepare for a very special presentation." I moved through the crowd, noting the placement of security cameras, the exits, the way the professional photographers had set up their equipment for optimal angles. They'd capture everything exactly as I'd planned. Savannah was already preparing backstage, touching up her makeup while her assistant held ring lights. Her phone was mounted on a professional gimbal, ready to broadcast to her 100,000 followers. She'd promoted this for weeks. Join me for the most exclusive charity event of the year. Major announcements, surprise giveaways. The backdrop behind the stage displayed a massive QR code for Hearts and Harbor's Foundation, promising that every dollar changes lives. I pulled out my phone, opened the remote access app I'd installed last week during a family dinner, where I'd volunteered to help with technical issues. One tap would replace their QR code with mine linking directly to a Google Drive folder titled The Hart Family Truth Evidence of Fraud, Wage Theft, and Tax Evasion. Elaine took the stage first, her recovered composure as polished as her gown. 25 years ago, Gregory and I started Harbor and Lyndon with a simple dream to create perfect moments that last forever. The crowd applauded, champagne glasses raised in toast. "Tonight," she continued, "we celebrate not just our success, but our commitment to giving back through Hearts and Harbor's Foundation." I saw Michael Harrison and Sandra Wu exchange glances. They'd heard enough admissions of the charity connection to establish probable cause. The MC returned, his voice dripping with enthusiasm. "And now, the woman who's redefined what it means to be an influencer with purpose, Savannah Hart." My sister strutted onto the stage as the DJ dropped a custom remix of her theme song, a copyright violation she'd never bothered to license. The LED panels flashed her Instagram handle, her Venmo QR code, her Cash App, all the digital collection plates she'd used to vacuum money from the audience. "Columbus, are you ready to change lives?" Savannah shouted into her phone, starting the live stream. The viewer count climbed rapidly. 500, 1,000, 2,000. Comments flooded in with heart emojis and fire symbols. She began her pitch about revolutionary charitable giving and disrupting philanthropy through social media. The crowd was eating it up, phones out, recording herself, a recursive loop of documentation. I checked my watch 10:38 p.m., 7 minutes until the scheduled revelation. The investigators were in position. Sandra Wu had moved closer to the stage. Michael Harrison stood near the main exit. James Fitzgerald had positioned himself where he could see both the crowd and the backstage area. The QR code glowed on the massive backdrop, people already pulling out their phones to scan it. Some were filling out donation forms right there, writing checks to a foundation that existed only as a shell for my family's greed. My father joined my mother and sister on stage, raising his champagne glass. To family, to success, and to the future of Harbor and Linden. The crowd roared approval. The DJ queued up a dramatic music build. The photographer's flashes created a strobe effect. I pressed the button on my phone. For a moment, nothing seemed to change. Then someone in the crowd gasped, staring at their phone screen. Another person cursed. The murmur spread like wildfire as more people scanned the newly replaced QR code. What the Savannah's voice carried over her livestream as she noticed the changed backdrop. The title of the Google Drive folder appeared on dozens of phone screens simultaneously. The Hart Family Truth Evidence of Fraud, Wage Theft, and Tax Evasion. The DJ, confused by the sudden shift in crowd energy, let the music fade. In the growing silence, you could hear the tap-tap-tap of people opening documents on their phones, the sharp intakes of breath as they saw the evidence laid out in damning detail. The stage lights suddenly seemed too bright, too revealing, as my family stood frozen in their spotlight, their empire beginning its public collapse. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before Elaine's training kicked in. She grabbed the MC's microphone with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we're experiencing some technical difficulties with our presentation." "That's not a technical difficulty," someone called out from the crowd, holding up their phone. "These are bank statements with your signature." The MC, a local radio personality named Brad Stevens, looked between his cue cards and the growing chaos, clearly out of his depth. Savannah stood frozen, her live stream still running, broadcasting her stunned expression to thousands of viewers. The comment feed on her phone exploded with questions and shock emojis. "Perhaps we should take a brief intermission," Gregory attempted, but his voice cracked on the last word. I stepped forward, moving through the crowd that parted like water. Each step echoed on the marble floor, my target heels clicking with more authority than any designer shoe ever could. When I reached the stage stairs, Elaine moved to block me. "Don't you dare!" she hissed, but the MC's microphone picked it up, amplifying her threat across the ballroom. "Excuse me," I said to Brad Stevens, who handed me his microphone without thinking, probably grateful someone was taking charge. The weight of it felt right in my hand. "Good evening, everyone. Since my family seems confused about the technical difficulties, let me clarify." My voice rang clear across the ballroom. That QR code now links to evidence of systematic fraud perpetrated by Harbor and Linden events and the Hearts and Harbors Foundation. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones lifted higher, recording everything. Savannah's live stream viewer count jumped to 8,000. The financial documents you're seeing show how charitable donations were diverted to personal expenses. The employment records reveal dozens of workers forced into unpaid training periods. The tax filings. Stop! Savannah lunged for the microphone, but I sidestepped her easily. Her heel caught in her dress hem, and she stumbled, catching herself on the podium. The live stream captured every graceless second. "Let me show you something specific," I continued, walking to the LED backdrop. The technology team, confused but following the apparent show, kept the displays running. Page 12 of the document folder shows a receipt for a $40,000 youth mentorship retreat. Would anyone like to guess where that retreat was held? I paused, meeting my mother's eyes. The Ritz-Carlton Maui. During the exact dates of Savannah's influencer wellness journey that she posted all over Instagram, Someone in the crowd pulled up Savannah's old posts on their phone, comparing the dates. The murmur of confirmation spread. Page 23, I continued, shows the ghost employees, people who died years ago but somehow still receive paychecks from Harbor and Linden. Page 35 documents the illegal tip pooling system that stole thousands from servers and bartenders. Gregory tried to grab the microphone cable, but Michael Harrison stepped forward, his investigator's shield now visible. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back." The crowd gasped. Sandra Wu and James Fitzgerald revealed their credentials as well, moving toward the stage with practiced efficiency. "Who are they?" someone whispered. "Department of Labor." Sandra Wu announced clearly. "We have warrants to examine all financial records and employment documents for Harbor and Linden events." "State Tax Commission," James Fitzgerald added. "We're here regarding fraudulent charitable claims by Hearts and Harbors Foundation." The photographers, initially hired to capture a celebration, now documented the complete unraveling of the Hart Empire. Their cameras clicked frantically, catching Elaine's mask of composure finally cracking, Gregory's face flushing red, Savannah's live stream showing her tears destroying her carefully contoured makeup. "This is entrapment!" Elaine shrieked into the microphone she'd wrestled from the podium. "My own daughter." "Actually," I said calmly, taking back the MC's microphone. "It's called whistleblowing. Every document was obtained legally. Every piece of evidence was gathered through proper channels, and every crime you committed was your choice." The viewer count on Savannah's still-running live stream hit 15,000. Comments flooded in faster than anyone could read them. Several news outlets' social media accounts began sharing the stream. "You want to know what was really in that small brown box you mocked?" I asked, addressing not just my family but everyone watching, everyone recording. It was accountability. "The key to the safety deposit box contains signed affidavits from employees you exploited. The memory card has recordings of you admitting to these schemes." I pulled up one audio file on my phone, connecting it to the venue's Bluetooth system. Gregory's voice filled the ballroom. "Just mark them as training period. 6 weeks, no pay. If they complain, they're not Harbor and Linden material anyway." The crowd's silence was deafening. On stage, my family stood like mannequins in a burning department store window, frozen, decorative, and completely destroyed. "The real gift," I said, looking directly at them, "is that you won't have to pretend anymore. No more lies to maintain, no more images to protect, just the truth. Finally out in the open, at the kind of spectacular event you always loved to throw." The DJ, either through dark humor or complete confusion, had started playing music again ironically. It was Money by Pink Floyd. The bass line thrummed through the chaos as investigators began announcing the formal execution of their warrants, as guests frantically called their lawyers, and as my family's 25-year empire collapsed in less than 25 minutes. The moment I pressed send on the signal, everything accelerated into choreographed chaos. Michael Harrison stepped onto the stage, his shield raised. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need everyone to remain calm. This is an official investigation. Harbor and Linden Events financial records are now under federal seizure." Sandra Wu had already moved to the backstage office where she knew the servers were kept. "We need all computers and devices secured immediately." She called to the uniformed officers who suddenly appeared from the service entrances they'd been waiting in the catering vans the whole time. The crowd erupted. Some guests ran for exits, worried about their own implications. Others pressed closer, phones raised, desperate to capture every second of Columbus's most elite family's downfall. "Turn off that live stream." Gregory lunged for Savannah's phone, but she clutched it like a lifeline. The viewer count now at 22,000. The struggle was broadcast in high definition, a father trying to silence his daughter's digital witness, both of them destroying what they'd spent years building. James Fitzgerald spoke into his radio, and within seconds, 2 more tax commission agents entered through the main doors. "We need access to all Hearts and Harbors Foundation records, including donation lists and disbursement accounts." Elaine grabbed my arm. her manicured nails digging through my dress. "You planned this. You brought them here." "No, Mom," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You brought them here. Every forged document, every stolen tip, every ghost employee you invited this investigation with your choices." The accounting firm's CFO, Martin Walsh, tried to slip out quietly but was stopped by Sandra Wu. "Sir, we'll need you to remain available. Your firm processed these documents." Savannah's live stream suddenly cut, but not by her choice. The phone company had received a preservation order, locking the stream as evidence. Her last frame showed her mascara-streaked face, mouth open in protest, the perfect thumbnail for what would become viral news within hours. "Lena Hart." A new voice called out. I turned to see Detective Patricia Morse from the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office. "We need your formal statement regarding the evidence you've provided." "Of course," I replied, then turned back to the microphone for one last announcement. "For any Harbor and Linden employees watching or present tonight, the Department of Labor has set up a claims process for unpaid wages. You'll get every dollar you're owed, with interest." Marcus Thompson, who I now noticed had been watching from the service area, stepped into view and began applauding slowly. Jennifer Liu joined him, then David Reeves. One by one, the servers, bartenders, and event staff my family had exploited began clapping not for the Harts, but for their downfall. The investigators worked with surgical precision. An agent wheeled out a cart of banker boxes from the administrative office. Another team photographed the donation display, where six-figure checks sat in crystal bowls like obscene garnishments. The charity auction items, vacations, and jewelry my parents had bought for themselves, then donated for tax write-offs, were tagged as evidence. "This is insane!" Savannah shrieked at me. "We're your family. How could you? How could I?" I cut her off. How could you steal tips from single mothers? How could you claim dead people as employees? How could you use charity meant for underprivileged kids to fund your Botox? The LED backdrop still displayed the Google Drive link. Someone had pulled up a particularly damning email on their phone and held it up for others to see. Elaine explicitly instructing the accounting team to bury certain expenses in the charity ledger. Gregory tried one last desperate move. "We want our lawyers. No one says anything until—" "Mr. Hart," Michael Harrison interrupted. "You're not under arrest at this moment. This is a warranted search and document seizure. However, I'd advise you to contact your attorney immediately." The venue's general manager appeared, wringing his hands. Should we clear the room?" "Yes," Detective Morse replied. "This is now an active investigation scene." The MC grabbed his microphone one last time. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's event has concluded. Please exit in an orderly fashion." But the crowd moved slowly, reluctantly, not wanting to miss the final act. They watched as investigators loaded box after box of evidence, as my family stood isolated on their own stage like actors who'd forgotten their lines. I pulled out my phone one more time, opening the banking app to show a particular transaction. "By the way," I said to my parents, "that donation you made in my name to Hearts and Harbors last Christmas, the $10,000 you claimed on my taxes without telling me I reported that to the IRS 6 weeks ago. Fraud in someone else's name is a federal offense." Elaine's legs gave out. She sank onto the stage steps, her designer gown pooling around her like spilled champagne. Gregory stood rigid, his face cycling through rage, denial, and finally, the first glimpse of real fear. "Mom," I said quietly, but my words carried in the hushed ballroom. "I'm not broke. I never was. I just couldn't afford what you were selling, lies dressed up as luxury, crime decorated with roses and fairy lights. This key." I held up the brass key that started it all. "It doesn't just open a safety deposit box. It unlocks the truth about who you really are." The investigators continued their work, methodical and thorough. The party lights still sparkled overhead, casting rainbow patterns on the walls, but now they illuminated a crime scene instead of a celebration. "Execute the IT warrant." Sandra Wu spoke into her radio. "Full server backup, all devices, cloud access included." The empire was falling, and everyone was watching it happen in real time, under the very lights my parents had chosen to showcase their success. I stepped down from the stage, my heels clicking against marble in a steady rhythm that cut through the chaos. The crowd parted, some with pity, others with admiration, most with the hungry curiosity of witnesses to a public execution. Behind me, the investigators continued their methodical dismantling. Voices rose and fell, Sandra Wu directing the evidence team, my father demanding to call his attorney, Savannah sobbing about her ruined reputation. The sounds blended into white noise, like the ocean pulling back before releasing the shore. I didn't look back. The grand doors of Riverhall stood open, cool October air rushing in to disturb the carefully climate-controlled atmosphere. Beyond them, the Ohio night waited ordinary, honest, free of spotlights and pretense. My phone vibrated with messages. Marcus Thompson. Thank you for everything. Jennifer Liu. Justice finally. 3 reporters requesting statements. 12 missed calls from extended family. I switched it to silent, then thought better of it and powered it off entirely. The valet station was abandoned. The attendants had rushed inside to witness the spectacle. I walked past the Maseratis and Mercedes, my Honda Civic parked at the far edge of the lot where I'd left it, not wanting to embarrass my family with its commonness. Now it looked like escape. Behind me, through the venue's floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the colored lights still spinning, casting fractured rainbows over a battlefield. The media would arrive soon. By tomorrow morning, Harbor and Linden events would be front-page news. By next week, federal charges would be filed. Within a month, everything my parents built would be liquidated to pay restitution. The brass key was still in my hand. I looked at it one last time. Such a small thing to bring down a dynasty, then dropped it in the parking lot. Let them find it during the investigation. Another piece of evidence in the wreckage. The car door closed with a soft thud, sealing me into silence. No more champagne flutes singing, no more forced laughter, no more lies dressed in designer fabric. I started the engine and drove into the darkness, leaving behind the shattered glass palace where I'd grown up, where image mattered more than truth, where loyalty meant complicity. The highway stretched ahead, lit by ordinary streetlights, no spotlights, no LEDs programmed to flatter, just simple illumination showing the road as it really was. My phone stayed off. Tomorrow would bring interrogations, depositions, and the exhausting work of testimony. Extended family would choose sides. Friends would distance themselves. The Hart name would become synonymous with scandal. But tonight, in this moment between the explosion and the aftermath, there was only the road, the truth finally told, and the strange weightlessness that comes from detonating your entire world to save your soul. The Riverhall grew smaller in my rearview mirror until it was just another light in the darkness, indistinguishable from any other which, stripped of its pretense and lies, was all it had ever really been. Elaine Hart taught me to create perfect moments, unforgettable scenes that would be talked about for years. Tonight, I'd given her exactly that, just not the kind she'd intended. The party was over, the masks were off, and the Hart family would never pretend again. The highway opened up ahead, leading away from Columbus, away from Harbor and Linden, away from everything built on beautiful lies. I pressed the accelerator, driving into whatever came next, carrying nothing but the satisfaction of a job complete and a conscience finally clear. Behind me, the party lights went dark. Thank you so much for listening to this story of family betrayal and ultimate justice. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this tale of revenge resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Share your thoughts. What would you have done in Lena's position? Would you have exposed your own family? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one and love hearing your perspectives on these complex family dynamics.